I guess I got to stop dancing so I can welcome everyone into the Irish Breakdown podcast.
I told y'all he dances during the 30-second music intro.
I was digging at this. I don't know why.
Vince knows he can't dance, but he likes to dance.
I'm a chair dancer. I'm a chair dancer from way back. And once the legs get involved, I'm done. So, but anyway, welcome to the Irish Breakdown podcast. I am Vince D'Addario. I am the football analyst here at irishbreakdown.com. With me, as always, is the boss, the buddy, Brian Driscoll. He is the publisher.
You call me the boss. That only adds fuel to the fire of the people that think I'm mean to you and cut you off too much.
I added the buddy. I mean, it probably falls somewhere in between.
Yeah.
But anyway, he's the publisher at irishbreakdown.com. It is Monday, September 13th. And because it's Monday, we have our look back on the weekend of college football. We also have our Brian Kelly press conference summary. We're going to talk about some of the things that he brought up. His press conference, of course, is every Monday at noon, where he previews the next week's opponent, but also talks a little bit about the game that was. So that is how we are going to kick things off, Brian. There was a couple of news and notes that he dropped in the press conference that was actually audible.
Oh, my God. That was the worst press conference I've ever heard. And it has nothing to do with what Brian Kelly said.
I turned it off.
I don't know who the heck is running the Zoom thing, but that person needs to be removed from Zoom duties further. There was some delay where Kelly was talking, and then there was some 30-second delay that he was talking what he had just said, and it was they were both going at the same volume at the same time.
And when it's the same person talking, you can't.
I felt like I was getting ready to have a stroke.
I
my head felt like it was going to explode. So I was trying to read his lips.
Yes.
And hear the things that his lips were saying. It was awful. So
horrible.
We were able to decipher a few things, and here's what we'll discuss today. Number one, Vince, as you referred to, Jordan Tebow is back on the 2 deep. Brian Kelly said they'll find out tomorrow if he's able to go this weekend. So we're going to kind of recap everything that we know about that situation and how we got here, basically.
Right.
So we'll talk about that. He also, it was interesting. A lot of people are asking about Prince Kollie being on the 2 deep, even though Brian Kelly said he's not available, which is why I've always said I don't put a lot into the 2 deeps.
Yeah, right.
But Prince Kollie is on the 2 deep. He will not be available this weekend. He is still dealing with, and that's according to Brian Kelly. That's not a source. That's not anything we have. That's according to Brian Kelly. He will not be available this weekend. Neither will Tebow. We won't see Tebow for 2 more games. He won't be available till the Cincinnati game.
We know that, yeah.
Right, and so. That and then of course he had some conversation about the interior of the offensive line and it was an interesting press conference. The questions about the offensive line were kind of funny, when people on the outside are asking about the outside noise. It's just kind of like you're not on the staff, right? You're not part of the Notre Dame team, right?
The only noise.
You are the outside. Your job is to create noise. It's called covering the team objectively and honestly, but whatever. It is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. Outside noise.
Yeah, outside noise. When outsiders are asking about outside noise, that was always interesting. So, but anyway, so let's kind of just jump right into the Jordan Tebow news. So, Brian Kelly,
Jordan Tebow they are pending a decision to be made tomorrow, if I understood the double speaking Brian Kelly, literally double speak. It was his voice twice.
Yeah. If you didn't listen to the press conference, it was really just and it had nothing to do. That's not a shot at Brian Kelly.
No,
it was
it's not.
We're trying to. Imagine if you have 2 people reading from a script. One guy comes in and starts reading, and then 30 seconds later, the other guy starts reading from the beginning, and they're both going at the same time. That's what was happening in today, but it was just Brian Kelly.
But it was just Brian Kelly. If
it was
different,
so weird.
If it was 2 different voices, you could differentiate which one you're trying to listen to. But when it's the same voice saying, it was really difficult. But so that's what I meant by double speak, not the way he was saying it.
Right.
But Jordan Tebow, there's a chance that he could play on Saturday, and I think that would be a huge boost to this Notre Dame defense, Brian. I mean, from many levels. Look, he's disruptive. He brings high energy, and he is probably one of the best, if not the best, arguably straight speed pass rusher.
I don't know if it's arguable.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're – because like Isaiah Foskey, Isaiah's not a speed rusher.
Yeah.
Isaiah's
a
power player who has speed, but his Jordan's just I'm going to explode Beach off the line. It would be a huge addition. And it's been kind of a weird journey to get here, Vince. We found out, we were told this summer that he was away from the team for a little while because there was an eligibility issue is what we were told. So we're going to kind of give a little backstory now. This is what we were told. Now that he's back, we can kind of talk about it.
Right.
And at the time we were told he was away from the team and it was something that could be season ending. Okay. So we didn't report on it because there was, Notre Dame wouldn't confirm and they were denying certain things. I heard it from several sources very close to the program.
Right.
I have no doubt that was the team felt at the time that there was uncertainty about his thing, but it was something that he didn't do anything necessarily wrong that he knew of. He didn't do anything. He wasn't doing drugs. It wasn't grades. It wasn't anything that he necessarily did wrong from what we were told. It just sometimes things happen.
Right.
And there was an appeal process. And this is kind of how the appeal process is taken out. So a week ago, we were told he may still be out for the year. Could be 4 games. There was someone on our message board, however, last week that said that he heard from his good sources that he was going to be back a lot sooner. And this would definitely be sooner. So props to that person for that. Because I got a lot more certainty about Jordan Botelho before the season than I got during the season.
Right.
From
it's
sources.
Been very hush-hush, and it's been very interesting.
Yeah, and just like pretending like it didn't happen.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. And the fact that he went from, second team to third team.
People were talking about how he should be playing over Isaiah Foskey in the spring to where he's just buried on the third team and not even on kickoff, not on nothing.
Right. And that's another point, by the way. You just said, not many on kickoff. He is an exceptional special teams player, especially on the coverage teams. And special teams have struggled, in my opinion. So adding him to that as well is a huge upgrade at some spots.
I hope that we see him.
Me too.
I hope that we also are able to see. Here's the sort of the domino effect of Jordan Botelho being back as soon as he's back to being able to actually go and play full speed.
Right.
And I don't know if that's going to be this weekend or if it's in the future. I just don't know. The number one, as you mentioned, the speed rush aspect. I can't wait to see him turned loose on third down.
Right.
I hope that we see him and Isaiah Foskey on the field together at the same time. I hope that we see those two plus Justin Adamiola at times. Whereas right now on nickel, a lot of times we're seeing Jason Adamiola, Myron Tungvaloa, sometimes Kurt Heinrich, sometimes Justin Adamiola and Foskey. I would like to see both Adamiolas or maybe just Jason, depending on what the rotation is. I want to see Foskey and Botelho. And then the fourth guy can be whatever combination of people you want.
Sure.
Those guys have to be on the field together. I also think I'm sorry, go ahead, Vince. You were going to
I'd like to see Myron move inside on third down.
They were doing that because
you know what I mean?
Jason outside.
Right.
My point is there were times they were like
Jason
2 to 3 tackle type bodies in nickel. Like remember that long touchdown against Florida State? I want to see more speed on nickel.
Exactly.
Especially on third, medium, and long in the nickel. And that's why Foskey, Jason Adamiola, and Botelho need to be on there. And then the fourth guy can be, whoever you want at that point in time. It can be Justin, it can be Myron, or a combination of those other guys, right?
Absolutely.
The other thing it does is it allows you to hopefully play Justin Adamiola some at big end as well now too.
Right.
Now Justin can play both positions, and that adds even – Nana's done a good job, but he's not where Justin is yet as a big end.
Correct.
And now you have someone that's not just going to be able to spell Myron at big end, but someone who can actually, give you the same caliber reps that you're getting from Myron at big end in Justin Adamiola. I think that also is going to eliminate if Justin's at big end, it's that dropping stuff that he's been doing that I don't really like him doing as much is not a part of his game as much either.
Correct.
Jordan Botelho can do that. He was a linebacker in college or in high school. That's the final piece. If they want to do some of that 3-3 stuff, you with a Viper, you now have the ability to do that with Botelho playing that position, and you can keep Foskey up front.
Yes, and I would love that.
That's where I could see that nickel look, that 3-down look being effective because Foskey's not that guy. Botelho played linebacker. He knows how to block, destruct. He knows how to scrape and flow and read and react and do all those things at the second level. He did that in high school. He was really good at it.
Right.
And he also would come off the edge, right? So if he's back to the guy we saw in the spring, if he's able to kind of be fully into the rotation, I don't know if it's going to be this week or the week after. So we're not necessarily talking about what we're going to see this weekend.
Sure.
It's more of once Jordan Tebow is back and he's able to go, that's what we're going to see.
Yeah.
And I think this makes this defensive line, which has been pretty good the first 2 games, even better. So that's certainly a big thing in my opinion.
Anything they can do to bring Foskey off of that second level, I just don't like it. I just don't like it. I think Foskey's way more impactful to this defense when he's up front. And you're right, Jordan Botelho can play in space, and I think that's where, outside of the pass rush, that's where he can really affect this defense in a positive way. So he adds just another element to this team that they're lacking right now. And it allows other guys to stay where they're really good, as opposed to kind of spreading them out. And I don't mean literally spreading them out, but like spreading out the responsibilities more than maybe we'd like to see, if that makes sense. So we got a couple of super chats, Brian, I want to hit here before we move on to the next topic. Mark Grismanich says, have you heard anything behind the scenes to give you confidence that Saturday's O-line performance will lead to Kelly holding Quinn more accountable?
No, I haven't, but it's also too soon for that. And there were some comments about, Brian Kelly making excuses for the offensive line and stuff like that. That was always going to happen. That's just how Brian Kelly is. I don't like it. I think he is willing to challenge other parts of the team, but not that one right now for some strange reason.
Right.
But I also don't think that Brian Kelly has blinders on and thinking the offensive line played phenomenal on Saturday.
There's no way.
I don't think he does.
He's been a coach for too long.
He may not think that Jeff Quinn's the problem that he doesn't think Jeff Quinn's the problem that you and I think Jeff Quinn is as a coach, but he also doesn't think Saturday's performance was phenomenal.
Right.
That's just coach speak. In regards to him holding people accountable, I kept waiting for that to happen during the Van Gorder era. I kept saying, this is going to be the game that gets Brian Kelly to tell Brian Van Gorder enough is enough, and it just never happened until he fired him. And he's not firing Jeff Quinn because he didn't fire Brian Van Gorder because Brian Van Gorder wasn't doing a good job coordinating the defense. There was a lot of reasons beyond that led to Brian Van Gorder's termination.
Right. He was getting pressure. That wasn't.
He was getting pressured. There was going to be a mutiny in the locker room. I mean, it was right. And that's the thing is, you'll never have that with Jeff Quinn because Jeff Quinn is a very nice, likable man.
It's a great guy.
That's another thing that makes it way different. You're not going to have this revolt within the team because of him.
Exactly.
Now there are guys that may say, "Hey, look, he ain't getting it done," but that's a different deal.
Absolutely.
So
we got one more super chat, Brian. Oh, did you have another?
Is
comment?
it regarding the offensive line? Because I want to finish this. Because I want to finish. I want to finish Mark's point about the offensive line. So right now, Mark, honestly, I'm not going to have confidence in that. I'm not going to have. There's no sources at this point in time of the year are going to come to me and tell me that, Kelly ripped Quinn. It's just I'm not going to get that info. I'm just warning you now. It's going to be let's see how it goes on Saturday. Now I'm going to talk to sources as much as I can to find out, hey, was Rocco getting more 1 reps this week or whatever the case may be. But one of the things that we heard from Brian Kelly was he said we're playing the right 5 guys. That's what he said. That could be coach speak, and I also kind of expect that on a Monday. Has he had a chance to sit down with players and let Rocco know he's going to play more, or so-and-so know he's going to he did say, now, could there be a rotation? Sure. So that did give me some pause that they know that what we saw wasn't good enough because he's talking about a rotation. If he thought that Saturday was fine and they just got to coach a little better, he wouldn't have talked about a rotation.
Right.
In my opinion. Just knowing Brian Kelly the way that we do. I think he knows that, hey, look, some dudes need to be held accountable, and they're going to, and again, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I don't think it's 2 games in. It's time to say, Zeke Carrell, your career guard is over.
Right.
Maybe a rotation with Rocco helps Zeke get his game where it needs to go. Maybe it helps Caden Madden get his game where it needs to go. But right now, both of those guards, to me, are on notice. And I would absolutely get, whether it's Rocco, Kristofic, Dirksen, whoever, I'd get him ready. I'd put Carmody in there and let him maybe do that if he's healthy. And he was listed as the number 1 left tackle. I believe Brian Kelly was talking about him when he said they need to test the ankle and see how it goes, but it seems like it's better than they thought. It was kind of hard. I thought that's who he was talking about. I'm sure it was,
because I know it was an ankle that took him out.
That double talk thing was difficult but I believe he was talking about Carmody. So if I'm wrong about that, please understand it's a little bit of a different situation. Because I think he was talking about Carmody. And so it sounds like he should be okay. But, Carmody wasn't playing very well in the first half. And honestly, I thought Tosh had some better pass game moments in the second half than Carmody did. But then they both had their big mistakes in there. So
no doubt.
It was a mess. And now we can transition on over to that other one.
Cool, dude. Cool. Oh, you already got it. All right, cool. Brandon Bauer, thank you for the super chat. Brandon, he says, do you see a QB rotation like Golson, Breeze? Reese. Wow. Reese in 12 for Buckner Cone. I see. I don't necessarily think it'll be a quote unquote rotation, and it's not going to be a situation where Cone plays and then Buckner comes in as the closer, because that was more kind of the situation in 12, wasn't it? Like Reese would kind of close out games. What was at times,
and if like he came in against Michigan because Golson was really struggling.
Yeah.
And then other times he came into, Purdue to close, to lead him on that final drive against Purdue. And
it'll be different. We'll see both, but it's not going to be.
The difference is because Reese was the veteran, right?
Yeah, right.
I mean, Everett got hurt against Stanford and Reese came in and, played the overtime, played late in the fourth, through the touchdown pass in the overtime. And then, of course, when Everett got knocked out after the Oklahoma game, Reese came in and started against BYU. But I think the spirit of the question is not specifically how those two went. I'm going to take the spirit of the question, just in regards to sort of a rotation. I think what it's going to be is what you and I have been talking about all summer. Is Tyler Buckner is too dynamic not to do something. You have to give him enough snaps, and this isn't about. And I know this is going to be the storyline all year. I get it. I understand. And I'm okay with it, because as long as people are talking about Tyler Buckner needs to start, it means that Tyler Buckner's playing well when he gets in there. So if that storyline continues all year, okay, that's fine. But to me, I think Jack knows this was going to happen. This is always going to be the case. From what I'm told, this has been something they've been looking into and talking about for the whole camp almost. Now, I've been told that Tyler, we reported at Irish Breakdown that, on our message board on one of our summer intel features, that Tyler Buckner was pushing for the number 2 job. That's how good he was playing this fall camp. And he's a very dynamic player with a completely different skill set than the other quarterbacks. And you have to take advantage of that. And that's what they're doing. And you want to talk about a QB rotation that this is, I think, going to be like, it's going to look a lot like 2006. And it's not Notre Dame in 2006. It's Florida.
Yep.
Chris Leak was the starter. Fans all year were clamoring for Tebow, and Urban Meyer stuck to his guns about what the role was going to be for Tim Tebow.
Yep.
And it was not as push. Chris Leak, and this is the thing, you've got to be careful, because if Jack Cohn doesn't know, Jack, you're our guy. This isn't a thing about if you have a bad game, Tyler's going to come in, because then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Jack's got to know this is my team, but we've got a dynamic player, just like, hey, look, Kyron Williams is an All-American last year. He comes off the field, right? Michael Mayer is the best tight end in the country. He's going to come off the field.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes, right? Kyle Hamilton's you're going to come off field sometimes, simply because it's a way for us to put pressure on defenses and to get a dynamic playmaker in the game. This is still your team, okay? If it's fourth quarter, it's still going to be it's going to be your ball, okay? Right. And I think that he needs to know that. Tyler needs to know that, because it's going to take pressure off both of them. And it allows them to both go out there and play their game. Because if this football team's going to keep winning games, they're going to need both of those guys playing their clearly defined roles. Jack is the starter. Tyler is the dynamic change of pace guy, which is exactly what they did at Florida in 2006.
Yeah.
And I think it's exactly what Notre Dame needs to do. And they need Jack Cohn playing at his best this season, because the moment Tyler Buckner becomes the full-time quarterback is the moment teams can develop their entire game plan around him. And that's not what you want. It's not what you want.
You have to play, as a defense, you have to play Tyler Buckner differently than you play Jack Cohn. Period. End of discussion. And so when you have both of them playing, you have to prepare for both of them. And that adds to what a defensive coordinator has to do. And again, you and I have been calling this all summer long, and they're doing exactly – if game 2 is any indication of what they're going to be planning on doing moving forward, this is exactly what we wanted to see. It's a package. They didn't run anything exotic when he was in there. I mean, it was a zone read package with some pass plays off of it, things of that nature. And you can expand that a little bit as you move forward, but it keeps the defense on its heels. And that's exactly what you want to do. And I think it's fantastic. He brings a different element to the game than Jack Cohn does, right? but I still don't want Tyler Buchner in there when the game's on the line on the last drive. That's where Jack Cohn is, and that's exactly how it played out, right? So I think right now that's exactly what I want to see. Now, you mentioned last night that if Tyler starts showing in practice that he can make all of those throws and he can
and make all the reads,
and I was going to say be mentally in the game the way he needs to be as the starter, then okay, that's fine.
At a higher level than Jack Cohn.
Yes,
right now
it needs to be higher than him. Now, do I have faith in Tyler Buchner in the future that he's going to be able to be that guy? Yeah, I do. But not yet.
Guys, look, Tim Tebow was one of the greatest quarterbacks of this generation, right? Guy played for won 2 national championships. One is the rotation guy, and won a Heisman Trophy as a sophomore. Right. You know, won a national championship as a junior. Led Florida to a 13-1 record as a senior. Was one of the winningest quarterbacks all time. Set a rushing record at the University of Florida or the SEC for rushing touchdowns. And he couldn't beat out Chris Leak as a freshman, right? Because there's value to having that veteran player that can execute the whole aspects. Because again, if you put Tyler Buchner in there and he can't run the whole offense the way Jack Cohn can, then you've now diminished Michael Mayer and Kevin Austin and Bladen Lindsey.
And you've got some dudes that,
right.
Yep.
Right. And so, I mean, look, Tim Tebow in 2006 threw 33 passes and 5 touchdowns. He was also Florida's number 2 rusher that year with 469 yards and 8 touchdowns. That's the kind of role, and that's why I've been talking about this Tim Tebow type role all summer, because Buchner has a similar type of skill set. He's a different type of runner than Tim Tebow. He's not a 240-pound linebacker.
He's not running you over, but he'll run by you.
That dynamic running ability in a different form, but similar role.
Yeah.
And so that's what I hope we see this season. And I know people are going to be clamoring for Buchner to be the guy and all that kind of stuff. And if that time comes, great. I mean, look, we're high on Tyler Buchner, but we also understand that 99% of freshmen aren't Trevor Lawrence.
Right. Exactly.
You know, and I don't think that the offensive line being bad is enough reason to just completely blow up your whole thing. It's get the offensive line right. There's things you can do with Jack Cohn in the game that can also protect the offensive line, as we saw in the second half against Florida State, as we saw at times in the game on Saturday. So the line has to get better, but it is just, Sorry, that with what I had to deal with the Brian Kelly press conference, every time that buzzer goes off in the background of your thing, I feel like I'm about to start twitching. It's driving me crazy.
Like Pavlov's dog.
Mute yourself when you're not talking. The bell's going to drive me crazy.
I know, right? I try to keep an eye on the time. I've tried to do better at that, but I missed it all 3 times.
Is that like, hey, yard time is over? I mean, is that everybody back to their cells?
Pretty much.
All time's over?
Pretty much, yeah. That means lunch is over and we're going into prep period for me. So, anyway.
Rouse Productions also had a super chat, Vince. He said the QB changeup is what needs to happen for now because of our all-offensive line, not because of defenses. Buchner's mobility may outweigh experience eventually. Yeah, I don't agree with that at all. First of all, I thank you for your super chat, but it sounds like he's saying that Buchner needs to be the guy. And I don't think that because, again, if the offensive line stinks, his mobility can only do so much. Everybody thinks that the only way to beat a bad offensive or to overcome a bad offensive line is with your legs. That's not accurate. There are things that they can do. If Tommy Rees knew that the offensive line was going to play as poorly as it did on Saturday, he'd have had a different game plan for Jack Cohn. And he'll have a different game plan for Jack Cohn moving forward. They're going to have to alter their game plan to be prepared for the offensive line to play that poorly. He's going to have to do that. And hopefully he's a smart enough guy, and I think he is. And hopefully there's enough experience around him with John McNulty and Lance Taylor say, hey, look, we've got to have a plan in case our offensive line starts getting whooped like that. And that plan can include Tyler Buchner as a change of pace guy, but it has to include Jack Cohn as part of that process too.
Absolutely.
And you don't just ignore what he did in the opener. You don't just ignore what he did on the first series. Look, his first big throw of the game was that 28-yard throw to Michael Mayer. He got drilled on that play, right? So Jack can still make plays when the pressure's is coming. And I think that people need to understand there are things Tommy Rees can and should go to that he can do to negate some of this that don't just include Tyler Buchner being the only answer. And if Tyler Buchner's your only answer, eventually, here's the deal, guys. Eventually, people are going to figure out what Tyler Buchner can or can't do.
Right.
Once we got to not fall in love with the backup quarterback syndrome. I've pointed this out before for decades in the NFL. Guys come in for 2-3 games. They put up good numbers. Matt Castle, remember him? Scott Mitchell, Johnson, who you were talking about the other day, not Doug Johnson. Was it Doug Johnson and Flutie?
Oh, for the Bills? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, with
You
the
know, he
Bills.
comes off the bench, does some nice things, and all of a sudden everybody thinks he's an NFL quarterback, and the Bills keep waiting for him to become a great NFL quarterback, and he was never that guy.
Nope.
You know, and once you get full film on him, so Jack Cohn's a quarterback, and Tyler Buchner is a weapon you have to use, and I hope that people can come to grips with that being the reality of Notre Dame, and I hope the Notre Dame coaches come to grips with that being the reality. I hope that they don't try to say, hey, look, well, what if we get Tyler in there more? Now you run the risk of not making the offense as efficient as it needs to be when Jack Cohn's in there.
Right.
And that's the danger. And that's the temptation when you have a guy like Tyler Buchner at quarterback is
sure.
It's an understandable temptation.
We have one question here that kind of goes along with this, so I just want to throw it up here. Jeffrey DeMunk says, question, why is Tyler Buchner the first guy off the bench when Pine is listed as the number 2? I feel it sends a confusing message to not only Pine, but also to the fans who want the next star to play. It's a good question.
Yeah, it's a great question.
I don't think people understand. Tyler Buchner didn't play because Jack Cohn was struggling, right? Tyler Buchner played because he had a package that was going to be very effective for what happened. If something happens to Jack Cohn, my prediction is that Drew Pine is now going to step into the Jack Cohn role, and Tyler Buchner is going to continue with his. Now it may be expanded, right? The Tyler Buchner role may get expanded, but I still think you're going to see 2 guys. That's how I think it's going to go down, because I think Drew Pine can do a lot of things that Jack Cohn can do, and then you don't have to put it all on Tyler Buchner, and I think that's important.
You know, I think part of this is going to determine when it happens, Vince. If
that's
it were
fair.
to happen,
if
it happens now, and to answer Jeff's question, this is something we discussed over the summer as well, Jeff, and it's because it was a unique situation because Tyler Buchner has that unique skill set. Is exactly kind of what Vince said. Is Tyler knows, Jack knows, Drew knows that Tyler's going in there because he brings a unique skill set. If Drew Pine was the athlete that Tyler Buchner was and the runner that Tyler Buchner was, he probably would have been that guy.
Right.
But he's not. And neither's Jack Cohn and neither's Brendan Clark anymore. You know, and Brendan Clark was always athletic, but he was never the runner. There's a difference between being athletic and fast and being a runner. Tyler is a runner. I mean,
he's a runner.
He can make, as you said, Vince, he can make people miss. He has good vision, all those type of things. So, you know, to me, when you look at this situation, they all knew that this was the role that Tyler was going to have.
Right.
They've been practicing this. Now, the more Tyler plays and the more productive he is running and throwing, and I thought it was really smart for Tommy Rees to have some throwing stuff in there for him.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the first pass he was going to take was a bomb. And there was they had a penalty where he got hit, and it was the stutter and go to Braden Lindsey. I loved that. I thought that was awesome because, like, hey, look, you can come and run. I was hoping he could get that throw off. You can come in and load the box, but this kid's going to throw it over your head.
Right.
And the touchdown pass to Chris Tyree makes you think, like, hey, look, you can't just focus on number 12 because we got 25, we got 23, we got 4, we got 0, we got 87. And that's where it becomes such a challenge. And then the next series you come out and you've got to be prepared to handle, Jack Cohn going through the offense and reading things out and all that kind of stuff. I think it makes it really hard on defenses. But I think to Vince's point, had Jack Cohn gone down early in the game, I don't think they would have necessarily thrown Tyler Buchner in to run the offense for the next 3.5 quarters.
Right.
I think it would have been, like you said, Vince, it would have been a Tyler Drew thing. But I think then we would have seen maybe Tyler getting a little bit more.
Right. A bit of an expanded role. I get that. Yeah, absolutely. And you make a good point. If you get to game 10 or 11 and it happens, and maybe you've already expanded Tyler's role.
If Tyler keeps doing what he did on Saturday,
right,
it may be by the Wisconsin game. And that's not a shot on Drew. It's just, it's all about how much volume can Tyler take and execute. Because if you only know, let's say you can only execute 10% of the offense at a very high level, you can be a great change-up guy. Because the 10% of what you can do is so unique to what Jack Cohn can do. You become the full-time starting quarterback and you can only execute 50% of the offense, teams are going to figure you out real fast.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be effective. And they're just going to do things where it's like, okay, Buckner's in the game. Let's just drop 8 and make him beat us as a thrower.
Right.
There's things that they can do. So, there's a lot. I mean, and again, the more you have to face too, the more you have to prepare for. And that's what makes it unique. And Jeff, that's why you can't bring in Drew Pine. Because to Vince's point, Drew Pine does the exact same stuff that Jack Cohn does.
Right.
So there's no preparation changes for those two quarterbacks. You're going to be the same offense with one that you are with the other.
Mm-hmm.
With Tyler Buckner, you have to prepare for something completely different. We have a couple more super chats.
Yeah, we sure do. Oh, okay. I'll grab it. All right.
I didn't know you were down there.
It's all good, man. It's all good. I'm going against what we normally do. So anyway, John A1, thank you, sir, for the super chat. He says, on yesterday's show, IB mentioned the O-line GA getting Tosh Baker ready as a pass blocker, which would be great. How does Notre Dame address guard play?
Hey, Jeff Quinn, do your job.
It's that and competition.
But to me, that's Jeff Quinn doing his job. Right.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
I gave a snarky answer. Vince is going to explain it. Go ahead, Vince.
He needs to he needs to coach aggression. He needs to coach fight in these guys. And part of that to me, and we said this on yesterday's show, I believe, is that I'm opening it up. I'm saying, look, whoever is the meanest, most aggressive SOB is going to be my starting guards, right? In a good way, in a football way, right? That's what I mean. I don't want people taking that the wrong way. That's what and that's coaching. He needs to get in his room and he needs to say, look, our play right now is not good enough. And there, no job is safe. And as Brian alluded to yesterday, of course, Patterson and Lugg are going to be playing. But you say no job is safe. I need guys that are going to go out and fight, and they're going to, do this, and they're going to do that. So who could do it for me? Who's going to be that guy? And you challenge them. You challenge these guys, and that's the job of position coach. He knows his room better than anybody else. He knows how he can push the buttons of everybody in that room. That's what he needs to do. These guys need to be pushed, in my opinion. I don't want to say that they're complacent, but it sure looked like that to me in the game. They're at least playing like they're complacent. And I'm sorry, you'll never have a good offensive line playing complacent. So that's what I would do.
I don't think they played complacent, Vince. I guess I would say is I think they play like they don't know what the heck they're supposed to do.
So they played lost.
They played lost. Yeah, and it can look exactly the same. It's like what we've talked about, and I'm sorry, I keep referencing what we've talked about in the past. It's just one of those things where if you don't know where, it's like, okay, if you go into a dark room, right? You're gonna be kind of like, okay, it's not like pitch black, but it's like really dark, and you're not. It's a new room. You've never really been there before. You're gonna kind of be looking around like you're uncertain of what you're doing. But if it's like that same darkness in your home, you're just gonna right? You know where you're going, right? And because you have experience with sort of that. Okay, I know where I'm going. I know what I'm doing, even though the circumstance it's a new. And the reason I say dark room is because it's a new opponent. They're going to throw stuff at you that maybe you haven't technically seen, but if you're prepared to coach stuff the right way, you can handle it. Like I remember one of the offensive linemen telling me one time, they're talking about Harry Heastan, and he was like, he would just throw stuff at us in practice we didn't even see in film. Because he was like, hey, look, they're not, we got to be prepared for everything.
Right.
And if you guys can pick up all the stuff I'm throwing at you in practice, then we're going to be fine picking up whatever they're going to throw at us. And that doesn't happen under Jeff Quinn. That is also a fact.
Right.
And so I think a lot of times it's like, hey, I'm not quite sure what to do here. And I also don't think – I think the technique is just terrible. I mean, that's the other thing is teach these guys to play with – you got two short, stocky guards. Teach them to use that short stockiness to their advantage instead of having them stand up all the time and get knocked back, The lack of pad level teaching and the reason I say that, it's across the board. Jarrett Patterson has that problem at times. Josh Lugg has that problem at times. Kane Madden's having that problem more now than he did at Marshall. Zeke Correll's having that problem. That tells me, look, there's something different about the guards this year than there was last year. Well, who was primarily coaching them last year? Wasn't Jeff Quinn.
Right, exactly. It was a guy who's busy putting up 69 points.
Right.
Anyway.
On Morgan State, but still, he's a Tulane.
Right.
I did want to get to a follow-up, Vince, from Rouse Productions. He followed up on the quarterback thing. So you want to take that one?
He says, what I was saying was the use of the two quarterback system is based on our O-line, not necessarily the defense that we faced. And they will use Buckner more when needing mobility when Cohn's skill set isn't working.
Okay, so he's not. I read your question, Rouse, as the change up, meaning you needed to change what was happening. That's how I took your comment. If it's what you're saying, then yeah, I'm fine with that. But it just we shouldn't be having this conversation. And I guess that's what ticks me off. We should be talking about, well, if the offensive line sucks again, then you got to play Tyler Buchner more, because now you're hurting your offense even more, because you're averaging 345 yards passing per game.
Right.
And a big part of that is Jack Cohn. And, he threw for 239 on Saturday, had a 37-yard play brought back that went to Avery Davis, brought back because of an illegal man downfield. And I gotta look more into that rule, because I have uncertainty on that rule, because I've heard the rule is you can't be downfield if you're an eligible guy if you're not blocking someone. But Jared Patterson just drove the guy 6-7 yards off the ball. I mean, he was blocking him the whole way. So, and I was under the impression that was factored in, but apparently it's not, at least based on the call. I don't know. It's confusing. But, to me, we shouldn't be having this conversation. You should be using Tyler Buck. It's, what it is, Vince? It's like what I say about blitzing. You should be able to use Tyler Buchner because you want to, not because you have to.
Absolutely.
And when and this isn't to your question, because I think what you're saying makes a ton of sense. It's more of a frustration with the situation that we have to consider using Tyler Buchner because you have to, because it's not about Jack Cohn's skill set not working. Jack Cohn's skill set works fine. It's about whether or not the offensive line is able to let the offense get into any kind of rhythm. And the reality is that, yes, you can get away with that against Toledo. Wisconsin's not Toledo. Cincinnati's not Toledo. Virginia Tech's not Toledo. You're not going to be able to just roll that Tyler Buchner dice out there every time and expect the same results. Because, again, remember, Toledo had zero film on Tyler Buchner.
And now there's film out there that everybody's going to be
not going to be the case anymore.
Right, exactly. They're
and
going to
be
ready for him.
We get to Cincinnati, there's going to be 3 games of film. When you get to Virginia Tech, there's going to be 4 games of film, and so on and so on. So at the end of the day, and your point's correct, but at the end of the day, I'm not pushing back on you. I'm just making a statement that can't work long term, because at some point in time, the line's going to have to play better, because then it'll become a problem for Tyler Buchner. And teams will find a way to attack the offense with Tyler Buchner in the game.
Mm-hmm. Final not final necessarily, but the last one that we've got to get to. D. Beasy, thank you very much for the super chat. This is too much to ask for our rushing attack to be more like Michigan's.
Isn't that sad? I mean, isn't that sad?
That hurt me to read. I watched
that game I watched after the fact. I watched the Michigan-Washington game, and there's a bunch of linemen that Notre Dame rejected, Zach Zinner and Trevor Keegan, and some of these guys that Notre Dame didn't think were good enough. And, Ryan Hayes, the guy they lost to Michigan, and I'm watching this line that I don't think is super talented, and I'm watching them just bully Washington.
Yeah.
And they're not super talented, but it's a mentality. Shamar Moore has them playing physical football. And I'm thinking that's embarrassing that Michigan is putting that line out there with guys that Notre Dame thought weren't good enough to play there. And they took other guys. And they're looking like that against Washington. And then Notre Dame looks like they look against flipping Toledo.
Right.
And it was frustrating.
Yeah.
Because she's right, Vince. I mean, she's right. It's like if Notre Dame's offensive line looked like Michigan's offensive line right now, Notre Dame would be averaging over 50 points a game.
Absolutely.
It's disgusting. And again, I didn't expect the line to look like 2020, but it should not be this bad. Anyone saying, well, 4-star. No, that's an excuse. This line is playing under where they should be right now. Significantly under.
Search agreeing. Those old linemen wouldn't be as good as if they come to Notre Dame. Honestly.
Isn't that sad? And he's not wrong, Vince.
I know he's not wrong. I know. That's why I put it up there. It's a joke, but it's not a joke.
I think he's being serious.
Yeah, it's not a joke to me.
Yeah.
I mean, because he's right. Yeah. Oh, real quick before we get to Ron's super chat, Michael Johnson says, Brian, it was a bad call. If you're engaged with the defense, it's not illegal man downfield. And he says, part 2, if you're not engaged and 5 yards downfield, that would be a flag.
Right. And you can't go 5 yards downfield, then engage someone.
Finding somebody. It's like you have to.
Right. He was blocking that guy at the line of scrimmage and then drove him off the ball.
That's not illegal.
That's why I didn't think that's what I thought. So I appreciate Michael clearing that up. That's what I thought the rule was. And it's how the rule should be.
Right.
He shouldn't be able to go downfield and hit a linebacker 3-4 yards downfield and then drive that guy, because that's offensive pass interference, basically. Not just eligible man downfield, but you're hitting the guy.
Which Notre Dame did, by the way, with Michael
I know.
Mayer.
Hey, you know what, though? Screw it. I'll take it because they did that
Absolutely.
worse than that against Florida State last week. That tight end turned around and blocked the dude as Justin Adamilola as they ran across and ran underneath them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's finally nice that Notre Dame finally got a call on their
I know,
favor.
right?
Right, but yeah, that was a terrible sell of the pick play by Michael Mayer on that.
I mean, he literally
laughed on him. And he was like, right? They didn't call it, but I mean, that was a big play that got taken back too. I mean, you add that play too there, and Jack Cohn's numbers look a little bit different. And that was the thing about Saturday that kind of when I rewatched it, and we didn't really talk about this last night in the upon further review, Vince. That was the thing for me is there were so many things that if you just clean this, and up, and I'm not even talking about the line. That was one bad officiating call. None of the other stuff was bad officiating. That was the only bad call. I didn't think it was a poorly officiated game other than that one call. I thought at the time those pass interferences were bad, and you were like, no, watch, look, he's got his hand on it, and we saw the replay, and you were correct.
Yeah, live it didn't look bad at all.
Didn't look like it.
I give those refs credit because I can never see that stuff live.
Yeah, and then they got. I mean, look, you see the replay, you're like, hey, they got those calls right. Those are the right calls. But they're just like those little missed opportunities that if you do this, if you do that, you blow this team out, even with the O-line playing poorly. And I guess that's why I'm not as down on this team maybe as some other people, because a lot of the stuff I look at and say, what's correctable and what's not?
Sure.
And even if the offensive line doesn't get that much better, there are things that they can do that can overcome that to where they're not going to all of a sudden be like a, 8-4 team. They're a 7-5 team. No, they're not. Because if they're going to be a 7-5 team, they'd already have a loss.
Right.
They're not going to lose. They're not going to go 4-5. What's it be 5-5 down the stretch? They're not going to go 5-5 down the stretch. But if they don't make these improvements, they could be 9-3. They could be 8-4 at worst case scenario, and that's not acceptable. This team should have a 10-2 floor, and it's going to come down to the offensive line, because a lot of that other stuff, Vince, is going to get fixed. It's game 1, game 2 problems. And as I watch a lot of the other college football, and this is what the rest of our conversation is going to be about, right? So,
in theory,
yeah. So hey, let's kind of just dive into that now, Vince. Because
we got to get Ron's super chat. We haven't gotten to it. I apologize. Yeah. So Ron, thank you very much for the super chat. He says the O line looks beyond confused. QB doesn't matter if you can't stop the opposing D line. Bingo. Yeah. I completely agree with that. Thanks, Ron.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to scroll back up to the top so I don't lose anything. But Brian, there were other games in college football that we need to talk about, and let's start off with the one that we kind of talked about yesterday, the Iowa State game, just because of how strange the stats ended up being for a 10-point Iowa win. The offensive stats for them were, pedestrian at best.
Weird.
And it just because of turnovers. That
4 turnovers,
If that's not the definition
turnovers
of turnovers,
bad places.
Yeah, the definition of bad turnovers.
Yeah, giving turnovers that led to, like, one of them led to a 6-yard fumble return. That means you fumbled deep in your own territory.
Right.
Their next it was a 14-10 game in favor of Iowa, and they had that fumble, and it was like kind of late in the third quarter. Neither offense was doing anything in this game. It was really good defenses by both, especially Iowa's defense was really good. But Iowa's offense has not looked good to me. They're feasting on turnovers because they did the same thing in their opener against Indiana. Their offense was very pedestrian against Indiana. I kind of look at Iowa right now. It's a lot of smoke and mirrors, in my opinion. And what I mean by that is you can't count on forcing 1 million turnovers every game. You can't focus on blocking punts. And they've forced 7 turnovers in the first 2 games. 7 turnovers.
But that's not how you win. I mean, yes, it's how you win games.
You can't win it week after week. They've gone for 303 yards and 173 yards of total offense in their 2 games. They have 476 yards of total offense in their first 2 games. Notre Dame had that in almost each of their first 2 games.
Right. And there were problems with Notre Dame.
And it's not like, okay, and the other thing is, when you force, I coached a team at Muhlenberg College. We averaged 40 points a game in the regular season. We only averaged about 350 yards of offense per game because our average starting field position was the 48-yard line. Like, okay, you can't rack up a whole lot of yards when you –
right.
And we had like 7 special teams touchdowns that year. You know what I mean? When I look at it, say, okay, that yards can be misleading, but they averaged 4.7 yards per play against Indiana and 2.9 yards per play against Iowa State.
Right.
Their offense is not good. and you're not going to force on average. You're not going to be able to get away with it, and it's timely turnovers too. Which kudos to them for doing that.
Sure,
but
it won in the game.
You just can't. And Ladarius is Iowa's a good team. I don't know what y'all don't see. Never said they're not a good team. They're just not going to keep winning games, averaging 200 and was it? Let's see their offenses. They're not going to win a lot of games averaging 238 yards of offense per game and 3.8 yards per play.
And where does that rank them? 238 yards a game.
Well, the 238 yards. Let's look at the yards per play, because the 238 yards, again, they had a drive that went -6, a scoring drive that went for -6 yards against Iowa State
because they had a field goal.
Yes, right. They had another scoring drive that went 18 yards. Their first scoring touchdown went 49 yards. Right, those aren't long drives, but yards per yard. So total offense, just for fun, total offense they rank near the bottom of the country, 126th.
Yeah, 130
in total offense. But let's look at a more realistic number, and that's yards per play. They rank, because that's more determined by your efficiency, not necessarily you got a lot of short fields. They're 125th,
right?
125th in yards per play. That's not good. Now they're still winning because of the turnovers, but again, you're not going to keep doing that week after week after week. You're not going to beat a bunch of teams, with a quarterback that's completing barely 50% of his passes.
Yeah.
You're just not. I mean, you're not going to beat teams all year. He's actually completing 50% of his passes. He's 24 of 48 on the year for 251 yards. Yeah. Hey, we got something here, Vince. This is a good one.
Okay, hit me.
Adam C. I'm going to get rid of this ESPN stuff blasting in my ears. Adam C. 40. Yeah, sorry. It's like, because ESPN just like this randomly will start playing the ads in the middle of things. As a Toledo parent, I'd like to thank Notre Dame for a first-rate experience. What was kind of funny, Vince? The first person that recognized us at the game on Saturday was a Toledo fan.
Yeah, it was.
He was like, Mr. Driscoll. And I was like, is my dad here at the game? And he said, hey, I'm a Toledo fan. I've been listening to your show all week. And I thought that was awesome.
Yeah. They got a good squad. Really cool. You guys are going to have a good season. It should be a lot of fun to watch. So, they put up a fight. They put an absolute fight, and your fans brought it. I will say that. Your fans brought the noise and the energy, and their section was packed. Mm-hmm. And you could see dots of Toledo fans, throughout the stadium as well. So, everyone that I ran across, they were great. So, kudos to you as well.
Yeah, Ohio State, Oregon, Vince. I want to talk about that one.
Well, and that was the one we kept getting updates because we watched a little bit of it, to start before we took off. And then we were getting updates throughout, and Oregon pretty much controlled at least the score of that game the entire way.
Yeah. And Ohio State's offensive stats were a tad misleading too. They threw for a bunch of yards, but they had turnovers, and
they did.
And a lot of it was just trying to come back. They threw for 484 yards.
484
54 passes.
Yeah. 64% of those 54 passes were complete, 9 yards on average. Mm-hmm. But the QBR was 81. Yeah. So that kind of tells you a little bit about what was going on there. And the Oregon kid, Anthony Brown, he was like 48% of his passes.
But he just managed it, man.
But it was the run game. Yeah. Look,
269 yards.
Yeah, exactly. That was my biggest thing with Ohio State last week. Mm-hmm. When they were playing Minnesota, is they got run all over. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be their Achilles heel at this point.
Now, these are the two most experienced lines they're probably going to play all year.
Fair enough. Okay.
But they got bullied.
Yeah.
And this is a defensive line with a bunch of highly ranked recruits. And like a friend of mine was like, they're real young. I'm like, no, their rotation guys are young. Zach Harrison and Tyreek Smith and Haskell Garrett and Teron Vincent and a lot of those guys, those are veteran guys. Those aren't young guys. They're bringing young guys off the bench.
Yeah.
They shouldn't. But I'll tell you, part of the problem too is their linebacking core is very pedestrian. And their secondary does not strike fear into my heart at all. It's amazing for as many highly ranked recruits as they've landed.
Yeah,
how mediocre they look in the back seven.
Right.
And then what was supposed to be the thing that overcame that was a great defensive line. And people are just saying, okay, you've got athletes there, but we're just going to beat you up. And so far, they're 2 for 2 in that regards. Because if Minnesota had an offensive coordinator that was worth a grain of salt, they might have been able to beat Ohio State or at least be in it late, and they missed so many opportunities to put Ohio State away in the second and third quarter. But it was I enjoyed that thoroughly. I went back and watched, and they were just beating Ohio State up. I mean, they
and you don't
they
expect
physically
that from
beat
an
them up.
Oregon
Yeah.
team. You don't expect them to be just a physical, dominating run team.
Yeah.
I mean, this
is what Oregon thought they were going to be last year.
Okay.
Before COVID, because they had Panay Sewell, and you know what I mean, and like they had like he opted out, and another guy opted out, and like this is what Oregon thought they were going to be before COVID wrecked their season. They thought they were going to have this great offensive line, and then because all those guys opted out, some other guys got experience, and now they're all back.
Right.
And yeah, Vince, it was fun. It was fun to watch that. And I'll tell you what, Anthony Johnson did a great job spreading the ball around too. He threw for 236 yards, which isn't a ton, but 12 different guys caught a pass in that game.
Right.
He had 17 completions. That's spreading the flipping ball around, and that's playing a lot of dudes.
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely.
So I enjoyed that. Ohio State had 3 receivers go over 100 yards. They're receiving, and that's the other thing is if their receiving core wasn't what it was, that game's not close.
Yeah, their receiving core is so good.
It's ridiculous.
So good.
It really is. It's to me, it's on par. I don't know if I'd say it's better. It's close to what Bama's was 2 years ago.
It's fair.
When they had Jerry Jeudy and Devontae Smith and Waddle and Ruggs, I'd say it's close. Those guys, I think, were maybe a little bit more explosive athletes. This group is a little bit – they've got like 3 Devontae Smiths as far as style of play.
Yeah.
You know, like great route runners and, you know, they got a bunch of Devontae Smith and Jerry Jeudy types. Maybe Jerry Jeudy might be a better comparison, but – and that's a great receiving core. But
no doubt.
Their offensive line didn't look good to me. They've moved some guys around. They got Thayer Mumford playing guard now, and they just don't. They look slow up front to me. I don't know if you saw that much of that, Vince, but
I didn't see a whole bunch of it.
Especially like even against Minnesota, like they look sluggish up front.
Okay.
Like they put too much weight on those guys, is what it looked like to me.
Gotcha.
And that
makes sense.
That was an interesting one. That was the big upset of the weekend for sure.
So the next one that I want to talk about, Brian, involves 2 Notre Dame opponents, and still, I would say a surprising outcome. I don't know if it was necessarily an upset or not, but a surprising outcome. Stanford I'd
say that's a surprise at USC. Okay. I'd say that's surprising, don't you?
Just putting the beat down.
Stanford lost to Kansas State 24-7 in the opener. Now, they did make a quarterback change. So Jack West started against Kansas State, and Tanner McKee came off the bench. Mm-hmm. Tanner started against USC, and he played well. The 42 points I thought was a little misleading, Vince. They only had 375 yards of offense.
Right.
It's just USC's offense was so bad. And I've been saying this, Keaton Slovis is overrated and Graham Harrell's overrated. I have been saying that for how long? And you know, you look at Stanford. They had a 87-yard drive, a 87-yard drive was one play, and like 87 of their 130 some yards came on one play. Second half, they had a 31-yard interception return, and then Stanford just put them away. They went up 28-13, and that was gut check time for USC. And USC's offense folded, and their defense folded. It looked like this is a team that just quit. I mean, that's what it looked like to me. I don't know how much of it you saw, Vince, but to me, it looked like USC just quit.
Yeah, and that doesn't surprise me at all because that comes from the top. And I've never really been impressed with Clay Helton and what he brings to the table.
But I hope that he turns it around, Vince, because I do not want him to get fired.
Yeah, I know, right? I want them to hold on to him.
Clay Helton to stay there forever.
They can hold on to him as long as they want, because regardless of you know how bad USC could potentially be, that's still a program that is very attractive to coaches. And if you get a good coach in there, they could be really, really good because they're right smack dab in the middle of some seriously fertile recruiting ground, and they've got a name, the tradition, and all that.
It was 42-13. USC scored twice in the final 6 minutes.
They had 15 points in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
I mean, they only had 13 points going into the fourth quarter.
They had 15 points in the final 6 minutes. Like, it was garbage time. Their last touchdown came with like 46 seconds left.
Right.
Like, that was embarrassing. I mean, that might be a job killer for him to lose to that Stanford team bad at home, and to have your team. And it's not always about losing; it's about how you lost. Your team quit.
Yeah, absolutely. You know? I was not afraid of Stanford in any way, and I'm still not. I'm still not.
I watched that game. I'll tell you what, though. I'll tell you what I like about Stanford.
Okay.
They have some receivers. They have some kids that can catch the ball.
Okay.
John Humphreys, you remember that kid? Notre Dame tried to recruit him a little bit. I thought he had some tough catch. Elijah Higgins is a big old kid from Texas. They have one of their running backs I love is E.J. Smith. It makes me feel so old. It's Emmitt Smith's kid.
Oh, no kidding.
So I felt super old. But, yeah, they've got those – you know how when Stanford's really good at those big receivers could just win one-on-ones?
Right.
They got a bunch of those guys back now.
They had those
Elijah
guys
Higgins is that. Tremaine is that. John Humphreys is that. Austin Jones couldn't get anything going in the running game. Nathaniel Pete had an 87-yard touchdown run. He didn't do a whole lot else other than that. Their running game's got some issues because their offensive line's not very good, but they were able to just make plays on the perimeter. USC's secondary is when you consider how many highly ranked kids they have, it's a mess. It's a mess.
Well, yeah, you talk about Stanford's run game. I mean, you're right. Nathaniel Pete had that 87-yard touchdown run, but then the rest of the backs that got touches, the long was 5, 3, 3, 7, 2. I mean, they weren't exactly, busting out any long runs. That's for sure. So they had a tough time getting anything going, and they average. The averages that they had 1.3, 1.8, 2.5, 0.6. It just not good, frankly, on the ground.
How much did you enjoy watching Texas get blasted by Arkansas? I normally don't root for SEC teams, and if Texas was still just in the Big 12, I would have rooted for Texas. But I have not so now anti-Texas anymore now at this point in time because they're the one that drove this whole SEC thing.
Oh, I'm sure they did.
And watching one of the worst teams in the SEC run for 333 yards on them was hilarious.
and Arkansas is not a great team.
They will finish in the bottom half of the SEC West.
They are not a great team because we talked about Arkansas because Notre Dame was obviously supposed to play them last year before everything hit. And, they were very active in the transfer portal, all of those different things. But they just they're 2-0. They hammered Texas, absolutely hammered them. And their quarterback only threw the ball 19 times, but he completed 14 of them for 138 yards, so nothing special there. But the run game, that's where they got them. 75 yards, 73 yards, 67. It was just, okay, who wants to get some yardage here? Yeah, come on in. Here you go. It's like it was just wow. It's unbelievable. Texas has fallen so far. Now, I don't know if they're going to stay there, if Sarkis, get them going or whatever. But
I like Sark, and I've always kind of liked Texas as sort of like a team that I like on the side. Not anymore.
Yeah,
and it's not. I don't have an issue. I don't blame Sark because I don't think Sark was like, "Hey, I'm here. Let's go to the SEC." This has been happening. This has been in the works way before he got there.
Absolutely.
But I hope Texas gets I root for them to lose every week now. Like if they played Michigan, I'd root for Michigan.
Oof.
Like seriously. Okay. Like that's how much I despise Texas right now for what they're trying to do to college football.
Okay,
and all based on greed. Based on.
It is. It absolutely
and I hope they get embarrassed. Miami's in a little bit of trouble too, Vince. I know you got to run here, but they needed a comeback to beat Chase Bryce in Appalachian State. Chase Bryce has transferred to like another team now. He went from Duke, and they didn't win a game. I don't think he won a game last year, Duke. Maybe one. And then he goes to App State. He was at Clemson. He was a kid that came off the bench against Syracuse in 2018 when Trevor Lawrence got hurt.
Okay, I know.
Because when Trevor was named the starter, Kelly Bryant transferred.
Right.
And then Trevor got hurt like in the first half in that game. Yep. And Chase Bryce came in, and they almost lost to App State at home. Miami could be in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah.
And BYU had a big win this weekend over Utah. Pretty convincing win over Utah as well. I don't know if you saw much of that game or not, but BYU was physical in that game. They looked like a completely different team than like last year. They had the quarterback, and they were throwing it all over the place.
Sure. They
came out and just ran it down Utah's throat, and that surprised me.
Yeah.
I didn't think that they could do that. I really didn't. I thought Utah would win, but I thought it'd be a much more competitive game. It was 23-7 at one point in time.
Well, and
BYU was up.
I was going to say because Utah put up 10 points in the fourth quarter. So
Utah has a very generic offense. I just don't know how coaches think they can. I just don't know how coaches think that they can win that way.
Right.
This isn't like when you beat Alabama back in 2008, man. You know what I mean? Like, I'll never understand that. Any other games, Vince, before you have to bail that you want to? Oh, and by the way, for everybody freaking out about Toledo, Cincinnati beat Murray State 42-7. It was tied 7-7 at halftime.
Yes, it was. It was.
Texas A&M barely beat Colorado. It is early, right? And Notre Dame's 2-0.
Right.
They're going to be all right.
That's the bottom line.
They're
So,
going to be all right.
So that's kind of our look back, and I think Brian is going to get in there and answer some
Try
questions.
to answer some more questions here.
There's some good ones in there for sure, but
Yeah.
I will see everybody tomorrow.
I got to ask you one question about college football events. If you were creating the spread of what you think the point differential is going to be for Nebraska at Oklahoma, what would you say it's going to be?
Nebraska at Oklahoma, about 24.
Okay, it's 22. So good. Oh. I'd set it at 40. I think Oklahoma's going to murder Nebraska this weekend. It is going to be
generous,
so
I guess. You
were being realistic because the line is 22.
Okay,
so you picked a really you picked a really good line. I'm looking more at I just think that Oklahoma's going to murder Nebraska. I think it's going to be ugly.
They're going to run it up too.
Absolutely. Especially as Nebraska's trying to get out of the game.
Right. Were they really?
Yeah. They are going to destroy Oklahoma or Nebraska so bad it's going to be ugly.
It's going to be fun to watch is what it's going to be.
Yeah.
All right, man.
Thanks for joining us, Vince. Yep. We'll see you tomorrow.
You bet. I'll see you guys later. See you tomorrow at 12:30.
So we'll get into some more of these questions here and just kind of roll through these here real quick. Jacob Dunn says, in lieu of personnel changes, could the offense just use Mayer and a second and two receivers as receiving options and use tight ends and running backs to block? It just doesn't seem like we will see the O-line personnel change. I mean, they could do that, Jacob, but if they have to do that, the offense is going to struggle. Because the problem is right now, Toledo brought 4 and 5, and Florida State mainly just brought 4. And if you're only releasing – so if you keep a back and a tight end in – so let's say they go 12 personnel, right? And that's 2 receivers, 2 tight ends, and a back. You keep one – so you keep George Takis back. And you keep your running back in the game. You now have 3 receivers running against minimum 6 DBs, potentially 7. I don't care how good your receivers are. If you can't protect 4 against 4 and 5 blockers, and you have to keep 2 guys in, you're going to lose. You're going to get beat by good teams because you're just not – they're going to be able to – literally, if you're able to get pressure with 5 guys, which is what Toledo was doing, and so it forces Notre Dame to keep 2 guys in to block. You literally have 2 guys for every Notre Dame receiver that's in a route. Because you have 5 linemen, you have 2 blockers and the quarterback. That's 8 guys. You have 3 guys in a route. And if they're bringing 5 and getting pressure with 5, you've got 6 guys covering 3. It's not going to work against Wisconsin. It's not going to work against Cincinnati or Virginia Tech or USC. Well, maybe USC, North Carolina and Virginia and Stanford. It's not going to work. You have to be able to get your line to play better. And if the line doesn't play better, then some big time changes need to happen now. Christopher Jenkins asks, everyone is focused on Kelly and Quinn with the O-line. Reese is the OC. What is he saying about the offensive line, and does he have any influence with Kelly in the direction of the offense? He has no direction on who Kelly hires. Look, this is very obvious. Okay, Jeff Quinn, Brian Kelly said when he hired Jeff Quinn that Jeff Quinn was the guy that the players wanted. I know for 100% fact that is not true. The players wanted Joe Gilbert. Chip Long wanted Joe Gilbert, right? That he was someone that Chip Long knew. He had coached with him. Joe Gilbert interviewed. The players liked him. That's who they wanted. Joe Gilbert's now coaching the offensive line for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They had a pretty good year last year, right? They won the Super Bowl. Line by the end of the year was playing pretty well. That's who they wanted. Brian Kelly's the only person that wanted Jeff Quinn. One of the several reasons why Chip Long's tenure at Notre Dame, it is because Chip went in there and told Brian Kelly, we need to replace Jeff Quinn. And Brian Kelly said, no, we're going to replace you. If you're Tommy Rees, what precedent does that set? Do you think Tommy Rees is going to walk into Brian Kelly's office as a 29-year-old second-year offensive coordinator, knowing that relationship with Jeff Quinn, and say, hey, coach, we need to make a change? He has no say on that. And the difference between Tommy Rees and Chip Long, and this is not a knock on Tommy Rees, this is just an experiential thing, is Chip could have more of a say on the offensive line because he has experience working with tight ends and offensive lines in the past. Tommy Rees has coached quarterbacks his whole career. And Tommy Rees knows scheme really well. He's a really smart guy. I don't think Tommy could go down there and work with the offensive line and coach him up. I know I couldn't have, when I was a coach. I could design schemes. We need to block this guy and we need to do that guy. But that's you need to be able to teach them how to then go block. And that's the problem is that they're now I think where Tommy can have a say is I think it would probably be smart for Tommy Rees to maybe have more full offensive meetings or maybe have more meetings with the quarterbacks and the line together so he can make sure that they see more film, that they are more prepared for the things that a defense are going to throw at them. I think that is something that Tommy Rees could practically do. That's because you're making them more assignment aware of what they need to do, making them more aware of checks and who they need to block. And then that way you're also holding Jeff Quinn accountable because you're hearing the things that he's teaching them while you're doing the film session. I think that's something Tommy Rees could indirectly do to help the line be better. But again, that's only a small part of it. It's now, can you go out and teach them how to, from a fundamental technical standpoint, execute what you just taught them to do schematically? That's a whole different ballgame. And that's the thing Charlie Weiss never did. Charlie Weiss didn't teach guys how to play. He taught them what to do, and that's why they struggled. Tommy Rees can teach them what to do, but he can't teach them how to do it, nor should he be held accountable for that. That's why this is a Brian Kelly, Jeff Quinn thing, because Brian Kelly is the reason that Jeff Quinn is the offensive line coach, and the only reason Jeff Quinn is the offensive line coach in Notre Dame. And it is Brian Kelly who needs to be held accountable if Jeff Quinn doesn't make changes. Now, I'm still hopeful that Coach Quinn's going to make those changes. I am. We've seen this team start, like, we're going to hammer them when they're not playing well, but I don't think, and Vince is still here, he can shake his head yes or no, he's still in the bottom of the thing. I don't think that this is just who the line's going to be the rest of the year. Now, it could, and Vince agrees with me, it could be that way, but I don't think that's going to be the case. I think they're going to get better. The question is how much better and how quickly, but they're going to get better. Are they going to get better enough to where they should be? I doubt it, but they're going to get better. They're not going to look like they did against Toledo every week. I just don't see that. The question is how quickly can they get the things rolling? I think that's going to be more of the question. Ryan Drake said, I had the same thought, Brian, while watching them use Buckner on Saturday. I think together they can create some headaches for defensive coordinators. Mr. Hewtown says, the experience we do have at offensive line was under 3 years of book style of play. Trying to switch gears to a pro-style quarterback is proving harder than expected. No, that's not accurate. Ian Book's style of play isn't much different than what they're doing now. They were a drop-back team under Ian Book. Ian Book would just scramble when things broke down. They haven't changed their offense. They're still running inside zone, outside zone, and counter. It's the same running plays they ran last year. A lot of the time, I mean, the pass protections, it's the same. I'm breaking these games down. They haven't changed anything from what they were last year. Same run plays, same protections. They've changed some schemes in the pass game, like the specific routes, and a lot of that's been good. It's been effective. I've liked what they've done, but they're not running a different offense than they ran in the past. They're not. They're running the same offense they ran in the past. Schematic in every single way possible for the offensive line. They're just not executing. So I'm gonna disagree with you on that one. Cameron Ford says, I am so excited going to the Purdue game next week. My dream since I have been a kid is going to Notre Dame game. How fun is it in person? It's a blast, Cameron. And I would encourage you, if you're able to get in on Friday, try to get in on Friday and experience some things. But Saturday, get up there as early as possible. You know about our tailgate because you said you're going to be there. We also have an article at irishbreakdown.com. It's called The Ultimate Game Day, Notre Dame Game Day Experience. And it gives you all the different things you want to do. There's a map in there of the stadium. Make sure you check that out. We did publish that last week, so that is up for anyone that wants to see that. But I think that is something that would be very helpful as well. Rob Didoff says, Brian and Vince, I know we have a long way to go, but to me, this is the worst offensive line since 2007. Through 2 games, I would agree with that. Through 2 games. Mr. Hutton, I do agree with this. Jack Cohn is too good to not try and work things out around him to help him succeed. I agree with you completely. Liam Gaming. Now, this I like. This is an interesting one. Liam Gaming says, do you think a second tight end will be put in a halfback spot to be used for pass pro? Now, it's similar to what was asked earlier. You didn't say this specifically, but I'm going to add this because I should have got to it earlier. What I could see them doing is going more 12 personnel. And instead of keeping a back in the game, putting the back out on a route and leaving the second tight end to pass block. That I could see. And that's where you can do is maybe you don't have him as an inside, but you can alter your protections where maybe you're not doing a lot of mic protections with the back reading the linebackers, but you're having him you're sliding more, and then that guy can kind of help on an edge where one of your tackles is struggling. That way you're at least still getting 4 guys into a route. I can live with 4 guys into a route. And then the tight end can check slide if you want to off the edge. But I think that would, to me, maybe be an option I would use at times beyond this kind of what they're doing now. Corey D, I feel like our running plays are not good. Plus, it would be nice to see some reverses and jet sweeps, etc. How much do you want to bet we don't run another running back screen for the rest of the year? It's absurd. They'll run a lot of running back screens. I mean, they ran a huge running back screen in the third quarter of the game yesterday. They'll run lots of running back screens. They'll run running back screens, I'll bet you, this weekend. As far as reverses and stuff, again, what people have to understand is reverses don't work because your offensive line's blocking poorly. Reverses work because teams are being too aggressive. And teams aren't being overly aggressive against Notre Dame right now. They're just not. And so a lot of the things that people are pointing to, I mean, I get where you're coming from, and traditionally that would make sense, but they're just not. They're not over pursuing right now. They're just kicking their butt up front. And there's not a lot in the arsenal to do when your line's just getting destroyed. There's not a lot you can go to. Bang 1801 asks, I know that Styles and Colsey each caught a pass, but how many snaps did they play? Not a ton, but I'm okay with what they did. So I'm going to look it up here real quick. According to Pro Football Focus, Colsey got 6 snaps and Styles got 7. And those were 6 and 7 snaps in real game moments. I think that they need to force the issue even more going forward. For the first game, I was okay with 6 or 7. Now, moving forward, they're going to have to play more because Kevin Austin played 62 snaps on Saturday. Braden Lindsey played 60 snaps on Saturday. That's a lot. That's a lot of snaps for 2 guys that, in my opinion, are both coming off lower body injuries. You look at the first game, Kevin Austin played 54 snaps, Braden Lindsey played 43. That needs to be closer to what it is because I don't think they can play 600 snaps a game, or maybe they can. I hope they can. But my fear is that they play 60 plus snaps a game and they're just going to wear down. And you can harder to see. There's times and I'll have it in my grade. So I have my grade for the quarterbacks and running backs up on Irish Breakdown. I'll put my receiver grades up next year in a little bit, but there was times second half where Kevin Austin was he was jogging off the ball. And it wasn't being late. It just looked tired. Now, he was able to dig deep on that final drive and make a play when he needed to, and that was awesome, but he looked worn out. And Braden Lindsey can't just keep running all these deep routes and not getting the ball and play 60 snaps a game. He's going to wear out. They're going to have to get Lorenzo and Dion, to me, 5 to 10 more snaps. Joe Wilkins played 20 snaps in this game. Yeah, I'd say maybe get him 5 more, maybe do a little bit more, 12 personnel. George Takis played 24 snaps, maybe get him up to 30. Just mix it up a little bit, get a little. I definitely want to see more 21 and 22 personnel with the 2 running backs. So Chris Tyree only played 18 snaps. Joe Wilkins played more snaps, and George Takis and Joe Wilkins both played more snaps than Chris Tyree on Saturday. That's not okay. That's not okay. That needs to change, in my opinion. Absolutely. Trying to get some more questions here. A lot of good conversation going on. Joe Balek says, do you think Notre Dame underestimated Toledo? I believe we thought we would pound this team and got caught sleepwalking. I think a little bit, Joe. I don't want to say that Notre Dame didn't come out playing hard, but they didn't play with the same intensity that they had against Florida State. I don't. I think to a degree, and I think to a degree they underestimated Toledo. I think they respected Toledo, and they said all the right things leading up to the game. We had an article about how they were talking about this is a good football team, but it looked like they didn't have the same kind of fire you'd expect the team to have in their opener, especially when you consider it was against a quality team. Brandon is very fired up about the offensive line today, and I understand it. He said, is the O-line performance at the point senior leadership of Patterson and Lugg need to step up and fire up this position group if Quinn isn't going to do it? Yeah, I mean, we've seen that in the past. In 2018, Alex Bars did that. In 2019, in 2020, Robert Hainsey did that in 2019. Last year, it was a very mature group overall. But yeah, we've seen that in the past, and it's going to have to happen. Absolutely. Down here, some more questions. Joe Balek, every score prediction I've seen so far this year has been off considerably for Notre Dame. Brian and Vince, please predict a close game against Purdue so we can win handsomely. This is why I don't gamble, Joe. We'll see. We'll see. I'll try to give an honest score, but I mean the way that they played this past week, I may do that just because I think that. All right, so Michael Johnson made a point. He said this O-line is fixable with a wide line split so the rush comes inside. So I don't necessarily completely agree with the second part. To a degree I do, but that is something I was talking with a friend of mine who's a coaching friend of mine last night, and we were talking about the Notre Dame game, and I said the line splits were so bad against Toledo. It was so obvious to me when they were running inside zone because the backside was just so reduced. And it was hard for them to get any kind of step because their feet were so close. It was like they were in short yardage a lot of the time. I don't like the line splits that they're using. I think they're too close. And that makes the edge a lot closer for those guys to come. And then so that way, when Jack Cohn has to step in, the pocket's really narrow and tight. I do think they need to spread out the line more than they are. They're not an air raid team where they're getting the super wide splits, but they need to get wider splits. Michael, I think you're spot on that. I think wider splits are a must. And I don't think so the rush comes inside. I think it just allows them to get more movement off the line and to create widen the pocket a little bit. So maybe there's some lanes for Jack Cohn to step into. But yeah, I agree. One of the issues that they have is the line splits being way too tight. So that's why we talked about last night. That's kind of what I was talking about. So they were butt to butt, like almost at the snap. They were like butt to butt. That can't happen. You can't. I mean, it's going to happen in like short yardage and stuff. But like when it's happening on inside zone, that's a problem. That's a real big problem. 3 guys are butt to butt to butt. That's a problem. Terry Howie, not a Quinn fan, and I know Kelly won't get rid of him, but he has to preach alignment, assignment, technique with way more aggression. I agree completely. David Pollard says, I have questions about whether or not putting in younger, less experienced guys on the offensive line will work. The problem seems to be Quinn. The counter to that argument, David, is that, look, Blake Fisher was their best lineman in the opener, and he hasn't been taught a lot of the bad technique things that maybe some of the guys that have been under Quinn for years have been taught. I think that's kind of the argument. But I think to me, Quinn is the problem. But at the same time, I'm not blaming Jeff Quinn entirely for why guys aren't playing as hard as they need to. At some point in time, look, the technique, that's a coaching problem. The assignment correctness, that's a coaching problem. At the end of the day, Jeff Quinn's not doing his job to get these guys physically ready to play, but there needs to be a level of pride in you as a player to say, hey, look, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to fight my butt off. And if I get beat, I get beat. If I mess up, I mess up. But I'm going down swinging. And I mean that figuratively, right? But I'm going down swinging. And that's the mentality they need to have. And, that's the change that needs to happen. Cameron Ford asks, can Notre Dame make the playoff honestly? Not the way that they're playing right now, Cameron, but I think the thing that we all have to understand is this isn't going to be who Notre Dame is all year. How much development do they get? How much improvement do they make? That remains to be seen. But they're not going to be the same team in week 10 that they were in week 2. And I'll point again to what we've seen in the past. Look, in 2016, USC started the season 1-3. They were terrible. By the end of the year, they were one of the best teams in the country. Ohio State in 2014 won a national championship. They lost by 2 touchdowns at home to a Virginia Tech team that went 7-6. They got better and better and better. Now, the difference is those coaches made changes. Those coaches adapted what they were doing, and their teams got better. Does Brian Kelly have the willingness and to look past the friendship thing and recognize that this ain't getting a job done and fix it? Or is he just going to kind of do what he did with Brian Van Gordon, put his head in the sand. Hopefully not that. I hope he fixes it because this team still everything I thought about this team preseason is still there. It's still there for the taking. It's just about, are you going to be able to get that out of your football team? And that's going to be up to Brian Kelly. Michael Johnson says Notre Dame will be okay with okay line play. Our quarterback and weapons around him have elite capabilities. Wide splits in the O-line could work. I think it would be good for the running backs. And again, I'm with you on the wider splits. I'm with you on that. I think that's definitely something that needs to be looked at. I'm not going air raid splits, obviously, but yes, I agree with you. I think that is an adjustment they can make because that allows them to get moving a little bit more. It also stretches out. I mean, for a quarterback, look, here's the thing. So the shorter the splits are, it means the closer the line are together, it means the closer the edge is to the quarterback. And so the way that Toledo was rushing there and the Florida State was rushing, is rushing wide and forcing the quarterback into the pocket when the guards weren't blocking anybody. And the pocket was so narrow because the tackles are so tight that when they're doing that vertical pass set, by the time they're engaging, there was 5 or 6 times at least on Saturday, at least, and I could be underestimating it, where the moment that Josh Lugg or the left tackle engaged with the quarterback, they were almost right in Jack Cohn's face by the time they engaged with the defender. That's partly because of the vertical pass that they're doing. But the other part of that is because they're so close that it's getting in there. So, Michael, and I'm glad you brought that up because it's not something I had addressed last night in the show. And you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Corey D, I agree with you. I agree with you completely. Makes a case as I watched the Ohio State-Oregon game because of Peacock. I was not impressed with Ohio State's defense at all. Yeah, neither was I. I like this. James Scott says, Oregon only lost momentum for a drive or two. They turned back around, regained their composure. The Ducks made Ohio State play at their place. That game, the way that game was played out, you'd have thought that game was in Oregon. They were in complete control of that game, that environment the entire time. It was really, really interesting to see that. Brandon says, in your opinion, does a 12-0 Notre Dame get in over a 12-0 Ohio State Big Ten champ and or a 12-1 Clemson ACC champ? Yes. Yes, their schedule will be good enough. If Notre Dame's undefeated, they're going to be in the playoff. Now, that doesn't mean those teams won't also be in there. But if it came down to an undefeated Notre Dame against a 12-1 Ohio State or a 12-1 Clemson, yes, Notre Dame would get in. Bruce Scherer says, does the O-line dilemma either positively or negatively affect the recruiting of Rice and Stroud? I think it negatively does because when you watch how bad the line is, you're like, wow, that's no, I think it negatively affects them. Now, again, it's 2 games, right? So if they come out and they're great for the next 2-3 games, if they kind of follow the same path they did in 2018, where they were okay against Michigan, and they were bad against Ball State, and then they slowly got better and better and better, if Notre Dame follows that same path, it won't hurt the recruiting at all. And I'm hoping that's what we see. I'm hoping that we see a similar to 2000, because we saw that in 18. They didn't play great against Michigan, but they did enough. They didn't play as well against Florida State as they did in Michigan in 2018. And they were worse against Toledo than they were against Ball State in 2018. But it was a similar – this wasn't good. By game 5, that line was playing pretty well. And by the rest of the year, after Alex Bars got hurt, they were able to do enough to just be a good, solid line. And that's all they needed because they had Claypool and Boykin and Dexter Williams and Alizé and Cole Kmet. And, that was Ian Book's best season at Notre Dame. He was really good that year. They were able to still go out there and win. And that's how I feel about this team. The line doesn't have to be like it was last year. It doesn't have to be like it was in 2017. Just do your job. Just be solid. That's it. Just be average. If this line just gets to average, this offense is going to be really good. Clemson won a national championship in 2018 with an average offensive line. They won a championship in 2016 with an average offensive line. This team has the skill to be a dominant offense if the offensive line is just solid. That's it. Kenny Moore's Ladarius said Clay Helton should be gone. Should have been gone. Well, the thing with that though, Ladarius, is there was nobody they could hire. The president has this thing where if you have any kind of check marks, like black marks in your past, they're not going to look at you. So that's why they didn't look at Urban. That's why they didn't look at James Franklin. It's not a super attractive job right now because of a lot of things that don't have anything to do with football. And then Kenny Moore says Helton isn't going to make it through the season, and I don't necessarily disagree with you on that one. Ben Tarnowski, what are the odds we can pry Cristobal away from Oregon as our next head coach? I don't think the odds are good, but would you like the hypothetical hire? He still has a lot to prove to me. Again, if let's just say looking down the road and Brian Kelly retires and he rides off into the sunset and they're looking for a new head coach, would I look at Mario Cristobal? Yeah, I would. I'd look at him. He still has a lot to prove to me right now. I mean, look, they had a decent year last year. They had a decent year the year before that. He's growing the program. The recruiting is getting better, but I still need to see a lot from him. I want to see how does he build on the success of the win over Ohio State? What can he do moving forward? That's going to say a lot. But he'd be on my radar for sure. But I'm not. This game this weekend was a big win, but it moves the needle a little bit, but it doesn't point it complete to where he would be a guy that I'm like, oh yeah, got to go get that guy. Thought I muted that before that cleared my throat. Apologies. Because I hate Peacock, $5, and I could not pause, rewind, or DVR. Yeah, and I do think you can go back and watch it on replay. I think you can do because Vince was watching it last night on Peacock when we did our breakdown, so he was able to move forward and things on the replay, but not live. Hey, Ladarius, I love having you in the chat, man, and I love talking ball with you. But this is going to rub a lot of people the wrong way, and especially me. Don't do that, my man. But you are correct about this. Texas will struggle in the SEC, and you're absolutely right. Searcher Green says the Jacksonville State quarterback was from Clemson too. I think he was. The Jacksonville State had a couple guys that were transfers. So yeah, but still, I mean, I'm not saying that's why they won, but yeah, they had a couple guys that were transfers from Clemson. So Zarek Cooper is the kid that you're referring to. But yeah, they have a couple of those guys that were transfers. They have Damon Filial Johnson. He was a guy that transferred in from Duke. He was another guy that transferred in. So they definitely have some guys that were transfers that played in the game on Saturday. But still, Florida State should not lose to them. Joseph Salvatore says, back to the Michigan line being better than ours. That's what I said when I watched them versus Washington. They bullied Washington up front. You're telling me we don't have just as good of linemen as them. Now, the one thing that people will say, and they're right, is that Michigan has a lot more experience. A lot of those guys, they have like 3 or 4 starters coming back. I get that. So I expect them to execute better. The thing that I don't expect and don't think is okay is, yes, they should execute better, but there's no excuse. There's no excuse at all to me for lack of toughness. None. That's not excusable just because of inexperience. Just the last few questions here before we head out of here. Adam Blair says, hey, Brian, how good is George Takis, John Dirks, and Andrew Christopoulos players? I really don't know much about them. I think Andrew Christopoulos or George Takis is a good football player. I think he's a good number 2 tight end. He's always played well when he got in the game. I'd like to see them maybe, don't feature him more because you got those, but I think they need to at least target him a couple times a game just to keep people honest. I think that would be good. I think it would help keep so that way when he's in the game, you're not just a blocking guy. And they tried to do that on Saturday. He was out in pass routes on Saturday, just the ball never quite came his way. Yeah, so, but Andrew Christopoulos and John Dirksen, haven't seen a lot of them. I mean, they had talent. I liked them coming out of high school, but we just haven't seen them play a whole lot, to be honest with you. So I really can't speak to what they are now. Andrew Christopoulos was a very high upside offensive lineman when he came to Notre Dame. I liked him quite a bit. He just hasn't got much of a chance to play. And I got a text from a buddy of mine during the game. He's like, this is what happens when you don't develop your younger players. And he was absolutely right. I mean, you didn't play guys last year, because you didn't blow people out. You tried to play that conservative ball, and you just didn't do a good enough job getting guys ready to play. Ladarius Martin asked, did Notre Dame try and go after Doug Marrone before he came to Alabama? Nope. Notre Dame's offensive line coach has been here since 2018, and he is not going anywhere. Brian Kelly, he's been with Brian Kelly for 30 years. Corey D said, Brian, Tommy should have a say. It's all about collaboration and sharing of ideas. It should be that way. It's about being mindful and receptive to new ideas. I agree, but that's just not the way it is for Brian Kelly when it came to hiring the offensive line coach. And again, it's because it's Jeff Quinn. Marcus Freeman had a say in assistant coach hires. Tommy Rees had a say in John McNulty. I know for a fact that Tommy Rees was involved in Brian Kelly going after John McNulty to coach tight ends when Chip Long left, because they coached together when Tommy was with the San Diego Chargers. So Tommy Rees has had a say in that. He's not going to have a say in the offensive line coach as long as Jeff Quinn is the option. Now, if Jeff Quinn retired, or Brian Kelly decided to maybe make him an analyst, or maybe John McNulty goes to the NFL after this year, I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just trying to create, and you say, hey, let's make Jeff Quinn the tight ends coach and bring in another offensive line coach. Would Tommy Rees have a say then? Yeah, I think he would. But when it comes to Jeff Quinn, he wasn't going to have a say. That's just a fact. I mean, look, Chip Long didn't. Chip Long did not want Jeff Quinn as the O-line coach. He would have been, of the 4 option, he was the 4th option for Jeff Quinn, or for Tommy, or for Chip Long. I know for a fact that no matter what Brian Kelly says, this is coming from the horse's mouths. The players wanted other people. They did not want Jeff Quinn. Harry Hiestand was not fond of Jeff Quinn. The players loved Harry Hiestand. I mean, this isn't hard to figure out. This is a Brian Kelly decision. That's just a fact. I'm not saying, I mean, hopefully it works out. Hopefully Jeff Quinn turns things around, and by the end of the year, we're like, man, this guy's a great coach. I hope that happens, but, I just don't see it. Nicholas Garage says, as much as it hurts to say it, we need Stanford to go 10-1 or 9-2 and win the Pac-12 division. We need them to be ranked high along with Cincinnati, Wisconsin, Southern Cal. We need a big win in November, December. I agree, but as long as Notre Dame's winning, they'll be fine. M. Kostrup, did Ian Book hide some of these O-line issues the past few years? No, because the offensive line last year was really good. I think Ian Book at times created some issues at times. He would scramble too quickly. But there were some times now where he was able to, I guess I shouldn't say no. At times he did. Not last year as much, but in 18 and it's more so 19, there were times he did. Now, there was also times that Ian Book created problems for the offensive line, but yes, his mobility at times allowed him to get out of some pressures that came. The problem with Ian, there was too many times when he would just kind of take off when there wasn't a need to. But when there was a need to, he was an athletic guy, could get out of the pocket and scramble and run and do those type of things. So, yeah, I think there were times he did, but I don't think that they were always this. What I don't want to come across like they were always this bad and Ian Book saved them. That was not the case. They were never this bad. Oh, DMK with the super chat. I did not see this earlier, DMK. I am so sorry. So sorry if this has been covered. I just got here. What would BK's legacy look like if he got out of his own way and got the best coaches Notre Dame could lure? His legacy would be that of a champion, in my opinion. I mean, I truly believe that. I think this team is so close. And that's part of my frustration with this whole thing, is because I do think this team is close. And, you're a couple guys away. If you just, stop being so stubborn, you're a couple guys away from having a really, really good situation. And hopefully he can do that. James Scott says, I like the way Book played. He saw the field and read his opponent's D scheme well. That is not how I would describe Ian Book's play. That was the one criticism I heard from many NFL scouts about him, is he did not see the field well. He did not read opponent schemes well. So I'm going to have to strongly disagree on that one. Edward says the O-line may get better, but they won't be going up against the likes of Toledo for the rest of the year. Will the improvement be enough to show better results against higher quality position? That's a great question. I don't have an answer to that. That's the hope and the need, but I don't have an answer for that. Zach Garza said our trip this past weekend was amazing. Enjoyed the close game, but I expected a blowout. The O-line makes me nervous. Buckner was electric. And not only was he electric, but he was electric, and the crowd responded when Tyler got in the game too, which you expect when a player like him kind of gets in there. Chief Brody says, do you think they'll get it figured out for Purdue? I hope so. I sure hope so. I don't know if he will. RT says, do you think they let Toledo score on that third down play to get the ball back? The Toledo QB should have stopped at the 5. I don't think they did. We talked about this yesterday and after the game. I think it was more of they needed a stop there. That was the thing. They needed a 3rd and 1 stop. They were in about 40-plus yard field goal territory. They had one timeout left. They had to get them a stop. It was 3rd and 1. You need to stop there. Stop them on 3rd and 1. Call your timeout. There's still well over a minute left in the game. And if you get a stop there, they're kicking a field goal, and you've got time to go down and score. So, no, I don't think they were trying to let them score. I think they were committed to making a stop, and they were too aggressive and didn't read it correctly, and the guy pulled it and scored. You say, should he gone down at the 5? Sure, maybe you could say that. I don't agree with that. I think your defense has to make a stop, right? Simple as that. Your defense has been playing great all game. You have to give them a chance to make a stop. There's a lot of things that could have gone wrong. Muff snaps, missed kicks, block kicks, all types of things could go wrong in a field goal. You have a chance to take a lead. Take the lead, and I see it differently than a lot. I understand where you're coming from, and I'm not saying that you're wrong. It's just, I think this is a strategy I would have taken a different approach, in my opinion. I'm trying to find some more. Thanks for being with us, Michael. Appreciate you. Really good stuff today. Jermaine Berkeley asked, maybe if we ask Kelly to get Quinn some assistance, like a really good GA or something, we can keep Kelly and Quinn from losing face. No, this is what the players did. The players tried to get Brian Kelly to hire Chris Watt in 2019, and he said no. I was told that by multiple people back then too. And then after the struggles of 2019, he kind of relented and hired Chris Watt, and it was a great decision. And so, yeah, I think, I think, but look, I think the GA they hired now comes with a good reputation. I don't know him personally, but hopefully they can. What I've heard, so in the past, Jeff Quinn has not been overly receptive to allowing tight end GAs to have much of a say. Chris Watt's situation was different. I don't know what it's like for the new GA. I honestly have no idea. David Pollard says, thank you for the great analysis, Brian. You are welcome. You give this Notre Dame fan living in SEC country so much fuel against the ridiculous SE files. You are welcome. Chief Brody says, hey, Brian, my worry is that Tommy Rees will start getting some blame if the offense doesn't improve. I think he's been great. If he doesn't adjust his game plan for a bad O-line, is he at fault? Yeah, he's at fault. I mean, he shouldn't have to do that, right? But at the same time, you have to call the game with what you have. And if you have great skill but a bad line, you have to call a game to prepare for that. I mean, it's unfortunate that he has to be in that situation. I feel bad for him because I think he's called 2 good games so far. And he tried doing things in the second half to negate that. I think how they used Buckner was part of that. They got him out of the pocket a lot and things like that. They did some things with Jack Cohn. They ran some boots with Jack Cohn. They ran an RPO with Jack Cohn. Early in the game, he ran an RPO, that boot where he threw the ball to Avery Davis on the 37-yard gain. They got called back. That was an RPO boot. That the one that they ran with Tyler Buckner later, they ran it first with Jack Cohn. So he did some of those things, but it's just the line's so bad. I just don't know what he can do, and that's the unfortunate thing. Cameron Ford asks, will Notre Dame ever win a championship again? I think so. Absolutely. John Erickson, IB sarcasm alert. Is our new defensive scheme an indication that we are planning to join the Big 12? Ouch. Ouch, John. Very ouch. Oh, my goodness. Jeff DeMonk says about the Peacock broadcast, I was using ESPN app for stats and ESPN Gamecast at least 3 minutes ahead of the Peacock broadcast. I knew what happened before it was on TV. Pathetic. I've heard that complained about a lot. A lot. I've heard a lot of people say that. Jeff Howard with the super chat. I appreciate that, Jeff. Thank you very much for that. All right, let's get these last few in here. Last few questions. Irish for Life, glad you were with us today. Appreciate that. Chief Brody says the problem Notre Dame is that people can't wait for us to mess up so they can drop them in the rankings and call them bad. Other teams often get the benefit of the doubt. Not sure we do. No, Notre Dame does not. Like Texas A&M can barely beat Colorado. And, they had a backup quarterback. Well, Notre Dame played with their third string left tackle for most of the game. So, no, Notre Dame's not going to get the benefit of the doubt. Jeff Fluke says, I still think 10-2 is the worst case scenario. I'm with you on that. I'm hopeful that Freeman figures out that his players and players walk into the BK offices and lay their jerseys on the desk to boycott Quinn. I was with you till the last part. They're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. Adam Kipker says, isn't Cristobal from the Nick Saban tree? Kind of. I mean, he was one of those, head coach, rehabilitation guys. And he was a head coach at Florida International for a while, had coached at Miami for a while as a line coach and played in Miami. And he got the Oregon job from Alabama. Jeff Luke says, if Freeman gets hired elsewhere, do you think Mickens will be gone as well as his defensive coordinator? It's way too early for that. We're game 2, but I think Mark Mickens would like to be the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame is what I think he would like to do. I don't know if he'll get it or not, but I think that's what he would like. Marcus Freeman's going to be fine too, by the way. Ladarius Martin, our Alabama says, I want y'all's DC, talking about Marcus Freeman. Irish for Life responds with, Freeman is staying put. You can have Quinn, though. Oh. Jay Clampett Investment says, we have history to tell us that very few, if any, positions at Notre Dame progress as the season goes on. I fear that the offensive line is exactly what it is, bad for the remainder of the year. I don't agree with that. I don't agree. I really don't, especially the last 4 years. We've seen this Notre Dame team get better and better as the year's gone on. The offensive line in 2018 got a lot better at the end of the year than it was the first few games. The 2019, the offense got a lot better down the stretch than it was for much of the year. Last year, I think the offense was really starting to hit its stride and get better than it was. And then Jarrett Patterson and Tommy Kramer got hurt. So I think their recent history especially has been that they will improve as the year goes on. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not correct about this offensive line. I'm not saying that because Jeff Quinn's got a lot to prove, but we have seen it happen before. If Jeff Quinn gets this line better by the middle of the season, it's not going to be like, oh my gosh, we've never seen that before. He did that in 2019 or 2018 and 2019. The line in 2019 after guys got hurt ended up playing better than the line early in the year. I'm not saying it's because the guys got hurt. I'm just saying that as the year went on, they got better and better and better. Tommy Gunn says, Brian, the game is what I'm at least excited about for the weekend. I'm excited to be in the stadium, the tailgate, the IB tailgate, seeing everyone on campus. Hell, I'm more excited for the bar and the hotel than I am seeing the final result on the scoreboard. I'm excited to see this game. I really want to. We're going to learn a lot about this Notre Dame football team. We'll get into all that here as the week goes on, but I think Notre Dame's going to be fine. I really do. And I understand the angst. I do get it. I promise. I don't necessarily share it. I think 2 games into the season is a little too early to be saying this is what this team is and there's going to be no changes and it's who they are and all those kind of things. I think it's a little too early for that. I think we'll have a much better idea after this weekend. As the more we see them, the more we learn. So, but I think right now I'm not as pessimistic as some people. Old Grim says, I think Patterson will step up in the locker room. He is the captain. I agree with you. And I think too, he played better on Saturday. That's a positive too. It's one thing to say things. It's nothing to actually play better. And I thought he played better, but I'm with you, Grim. I think he'll step up and say some things. Sparkling Swan, have you adjusted your win total yet for Notre Dame, or do you still have them going 12-0? They look like a 9-3 team to me. So I don't really do it that way. I make my prediction at the beginning of the year, and then after that, it's just evaluating the team as they go. I still don't see a team on their schedule that has more talent than they do. I still don't see a team on the schedule that's just playing so great right now that they're going to lose. Look, like I said, Cincinnati, Wisconsin looked terrible against Penn State. Terrible against Penn State. They didn't look a whole lot better against Eastern Michigan. So, you look at Cincinnati was tied 7-7 with an FCS team, Murray State, at halftime this past weekend. You look at Stanford, and they look great against USC. They look terrible against Kansas State. USC looked terrible against San Jose State. Looked terrible against Stanford. North Carolina looked terrible against Virginia Tech. Virginia's looked good this year so far. Georgia Tech lost to Northern Illinois. Like, who are the 3 teams that right now are playing better than Notre Dame? That's the thing, is we got to have context. You can't just say they look like a 9-3 team. Okay, well, who are the 3 teams they're going to lose to? because there's a lot of other teams that would trade places on Notre Dame's schedule that would trade places with Notre Dame in a heartbeat, including all the teams that have a loss. So, I mean, I get it. So, yeah. Let's just see how they develop. Let's see how they play this weekend. If they don't make any improvement this weekend, then maybe I'll have a change of heart. But I think 2 games is just too early for that. Paul Rose says, just got back in town. Had to watch the game on my phone this weekend. Hopefully no more O-line injuries so they can get things rolling. I hope so too. And no, Graham, I apologize. I read your question, but I did not thank you for the super chat. I appreciate the super chat very, very much. And I think that's going to be it. So I appreciate everybody being in the show today. A lot going on. Obviously, if you just got in late, we talked a lot about Brian Kelly's press conference at the beginning of the show. So we had a lot to talk about with Jordan Tebow, the offensive line, Tyler Buckner, Jack Cohn, all that kind of stuff. So go back and check it out. Appreciate everybody being here with us. Make sure you're locked into irishbreakdown.com. Make sure that if you haven't signed up yet, sign up for our message boards. Tons of great conversation going on there. We'll be back tomorrow at 12:30. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, notification bell, and you'll get a notification that we are good to go tomorrow. So I hope everybody has a great rest of your day. Check out Irish Breakdown. Sign up for the Irish Breakdown message boards. We will have our Irish Breakdown tailgate on Saturday at Purdue. So if you're going to be in town, we'd love to see y'all. And like I said, hit that notification bell. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you all again very, very soon.